So, the trial of the century, and we heard that when Chapo was brought in front of the government, but this, of course, is a lot bigger deal, to be honest. It's the first time they've ever had such an all-star lineup, if you want to look at it like that, of the who's who in recent history of the whole narco game. And the fact May0's brother is due to testify tomorrow on Monday, the 13th, Jesus Reynaldo Frei Zambada. I'm pretty sure it's the first person this high up in the criminal underworld, with exception to Chapo, of course, has ever been brought in front of the court to talk and break down what's been going on. And the fact they're going after Garcia Luna, it's huge. And of course, this does put lots of pressure on the government of the United States and Mexico's relationship. And before we jump into this a little bit deeper, if you guys would like to support the channel, you can do so at the link below and buy me a coffee, or in the super chat on YouTube as well. Smash on that like button and leave a comment down below. I really do appreciate you taking that second out of your day. It does help me out. Now, Garcia Luna is going to be completely overwhelmed as far as his defense and the amount of information that's being brought against him. I want to show you guys a letter that was released, actually asking for the notes and some of the information that law enforcement attained from interviewing my brother, and it kind of shows the amount of time they actually spent digging his brain before they brought him to court. So it says, "Dear Judge Kogan, I write to the court in an issue regarding 18 U.S.C. 3500 and lack thereof relating to the government's next witness in which the defense may seek a remedy." It says, "I expect tomorrow morning the government will call a substantive cooperating witness. The defense has received material that relates to the government's prior sentencing in March 2020. However, as well as its oral remarks, the witness in sentencing, the government informed the sentencing court that it had been defined by the government. He had been debriefed by the government more than 100 times. So they literally interviewed this man, May0's brother, over 100 times. You can imagine each one of those set interviews was many hours, and it then says, this raises at least the following two questions. Are there notes from at least all these meetings? And if so, where are the notes? And why have they not been produced?" So you can imagine a lot of the information they probably want to ask him and bring in front of the court has already been asked, and they can kind of just read through the questions and fill in the gaps of what hasn't been asked. I think it would probably save them a lot of time, but as we know, the American government, as far as law enforcement agencies, they're known for not sharing information in between each other. And this document brings to light how, if you think each one of these people who are going to be testifying, of course, against Garcia Luna, how much time was spent on each of them individually, and you look at how it shows a huge picture of how much time these trials actually have invested in them as far as manpower and hours. It's insane. And all this, at the end of the day, to bring the highest member of Mexican law enforcement, or the Mexican government, you could say, to be held responsible, which, on one side is a good thing, because think about all the people who've suffered. But at the same time, let's remember who's actually causing this war on drugs, right? It's kind of like they cause the problem and then they arrest someone for participating in a game that they're hosting. But it is what it is, and people know the rules when they get into it, right? Now, El Rey was also, El Rey being May0's brother, held in a maximum security prison in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, up until the 4th of April 2012. That's when he was actually extradited to the United States. And Brian Kogan, the judge, determined that the ex-Secretary of Security of Mexico, which of course is Garcia Luna, will not have any restrictions as far as the questions that they're able to bring up and ask him. So basically nothing's off the table according to the judge. And there's a lot of very high profile, very important people that of course were involved with all these big names. El Rey was basically May0's right hand, and his voice to the world while he was grooming Vicente. Of course, when Vicente came of age, and he did eventually, but he wasn't in the field operating that long, he was supposed to replace Reina Mayo when they got old, right? That was the idea. But things never work out like they're planned. So at the end of the day, Mayo did end up losing El Rey, and he also ended up losing his son Vicente, right? He lost both of them. And of course, that does create huge problems in an organization when you lose someone that you need to trust that bad, that is that important, and they're actually family to you. But that's what happens when you involve your family in that game, too. It's almost guaranteed you're going to lose them one way or another, whether it's through death or through a very extensive prison sentence. And El Rey, we have to remember, they even tried to contract members of the Russian mafia to do a hit on him, to take him out. I actually did a video on that to prevent him from testifying him. And these are the same very high profile members of like Mexican law enforcement and the Mexican government that contracted these members of organized crime. And if you ask why would they contract a group from Russia, I think because it'd be harder for it to be traced back to them than a local group from here in Mexico. That's just pretty much common sense of I think why they do that. And they obviously weren't able to because he's here to testify now, but I wonder how many hits were actually put out on this man and how hard the American government actually had of a time protecting him to get him to this point where May0's brother's actually able to come and speak openly at this trial. Of course, this pissed a lot of people off, and a lot of heads rolled at the end of the day. And we have to remember he was also arrested due to pressure put on Mexican law enforcement by the Beltran Leyva organization during the conflict in between the Beltran Leyvas and the Sinaloa as a whole. And this was all due to the Beltran Leyvas blaming Chapo for giving up the leader of their organization at one point. Supposedly they found out through agents of the DEA and other ways what really happened, and it caused a war. So, everybody gives people up and gives information. Sometimes they're giving up their rivals. Sometimes they're giving up people in their own organization. Sometimes they're giving up their own family members. That shows you how brutal and how traitorous, these organizations are as a whole. And if you get into the rules of this game that they're playing, nothing is sacred any longer, and everybody has to pay the piper eventually, my friends. Even if you're May0's brother, if you look at it in this case. And if you didn't see the video of what happened to his son, who was arrested along with him, that's also, a very hard hit, I can imagine. His son was found hanging by a curtain in witness protection. That's, of consequence of being in that life, and that's something a lot of people don't even talk about. And it's kind of a story that's never really been brought to the light to a large extent, but it was May0's nephew at the end of the day, and El Rey's son, and he was arrested along with him the day that he was caught. And he actually originally thought Mexican law enforcement were coming to kill him, and he, probably was right. But he was informed that Beltran Leyvas actually paid them to do a hit on him, and he called other members of Mexican law enforcement that he actually knew, that of course were corrupt, however you want to put it, to show up and try to rescue him or make sure everything is okay, and they didn't kill him. And I guess that's exactly what happened. But either way, he ended up going to prison. He ended up losing his son to what some people say a questionable self-initiated death. And crazy story, you guys. It's more than enough to make a movie on it. Maybe someday we will see a movie made on this. But until then, it is the trial of the century. And we'll see what El Rey has to say tomorrow. I'm sure he's going to blow a lot of people out of their seats. And like I said, the actual level of his information, he's someone who's met with presidents of countries on a regular basis and discussed things that involve the movement of billions, not millions of dollars. And a lot of people underestimate how much this actual business of moving these substances is worth. They base it on numbers of what the United States confiscates every year, but that's just one country, their confiscations. And remember, they're only confiscating probably 5, maybe 10% of what's going through. So basing it on just that small amount confiscated is laughable. I'll leave you guys with that thought. If you didn't already, please put a comment down below. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate every second of your time you guys give me. Adios, my friends. I'll see you guys on the flip side, and I'll probably do a video on what he actually says and what comes out at the end of the day, especially if it's something controversial or groundbreaking. Adios.